welcome into another episode of Third Round Reversal. Here, Brett Malamud with Zach Malamud. Zach, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. We're into July, Brett. About a month left, and we really get into the swing of things, and fantasy football is almost here.
Yeah, it's a busy day. Happy Canada Day to all of our followers following up north, and a busy day in pretty much every sport right now except for football, with NBA free agency, NHL free agency, soccer transfer windows all just opened. And so, yeah, we're going to dive in now as we start to get into draft season. Now we will dive into some redraft candidates of what we think you guys should add in your redraft leagues. And we're going to start this week with some sleepers. Next week, we will head in to some overvalues. But this week, let's start to go into the quarterbacks. And we start with Russell Wilson as a sleeper. Right now, he is 116 overall, quarterback 16. Zach, take us through Russell Wilson.
So Russell Wilson, I mean, you look at last year, and it was a rough year for him, definitely coming in his first year in Denver. However, I think this is just way too low where he's ranked right now, 16. Yes, he's ranked 16 the last 2 years, his last year in Seattle and then last season in Denver. You might think, oh, that's the perfect spot for him. He's always going to finish quarterback 16. I think there's going to be a lot of improvement this year, especially with how many options he has and how many weapons he has in his offense. Russell Wilson, definitely a little bit too low for me as quarterback 16 and ranked 116 overall. That's about 11th, 12th round. I think that's a little bit later for what I'm expecting from Russell Wilson this season.
Yeah, to pick him in the 12th round, I think is a little later than I would want him also. And I think that if you can get him in at the 12th round, then that's a good steal because I think he's going to be worth more than that. Right now, he's probably a high-end backup, but, you probably look at that like 8th, 9th round. If you want to get that first wave of backup quarterbacks. There is the potential, though, that he ends up as one of those top 12 quarterbacks just based on the fact that I'm not sure that he could have gotten any worse. We spoke about this a little bit on our buy low episode last week. Go check that one out for Dynasty. But as far as redraft, yeah, I mean, he had career worst in completion percentage, passer rating, touchdown passes, career high in sacks. Jerry Jeudy wasn't that good last year. Cortland Sutton wasn't that good last year. And so, therefore, I think that Wilson is a good candidate for you to take at a very, very, very low discount.
Yeah, and we'll see. We have a ton of guys on the Broncos in this sleeper edition that will definitely improve from what they did last year.
Yeah, and the new coaching staff definitely helped as well. Do not forget that Sean Payton is there and the magic that he has been able to create from his time in the NFL. All right, so now let's jump to another, and it's Geno Smith. We spoke also about him in Dynasty from that perspective, but right now he is ranked right the spot before, I believe, at 115 overall and the 15th quarterback. And this is one of those, I'm not really quite sure why everybody is so low on Geno Smith. Even last year, I can understand like he wasn't maybe going to be the starter. There was talk of being the starter, but he nailed that job. Listen, he had 4,200 yards, 30 touchdowns. He led the NFL in completion percentage, one comeback player of the year. I think that, a guy who finished quarterback 5 in fantasy, it's pretty, ridiculous that we're talking in not even the top, 10 quarterbacks. I think that this is a offense that has been able to add. Obviously, they got another receiver in the draft. And so I think that if you're in a super flex league, he's, again, one of those really, really strong quarterbacks that you can have on your team. And, why wouldn't you take a chance on Geno?
Yeah, definitely. And Geno, like you mentioned, he finished quarterback 5 last season. And you may say, okay, the quarterbacks ahead of him are maybe more consistent quarterbacks. They've shown throughout their career that they can be a consistent starter in fantasy and get the job done for you when you need it. Geno Smith, though, I mean, he's in a perfect spot right now. Like we said, quarterback 5 last season. The big thing for me was the completion percentage, 69.8% last season. That was really good, especially in an offense that particularly looks at the run. I mean, they're a run-heavy offense. They focus on their running backs. And when he got his opportunity, Geno Smith, he got the job done 69.8% of the time. That's great numbers. That's what stands out to me. I think he's going to have another great season. Ranking him 15 right now is a little low. I definitely think he has a high ceiling at this moment in time, especially adding options into that offense. They really haven't lost much since the last year. It's basically the same team and just adding more.
Yeah, another guy who's even lower on the list is Jared Goff. Jared Goff is ranked right now 215 overall and quarterback 21. I mean, this is a guy who literally 4 weeks finished in the top 5 of quarterbacks. He finished as quarterback 10. And, again, we talk weapons. Like, this guy has a ton of weapons. They just got another running back. And, of course, they shipped one out. But you're talking about, even if they can't get the passing game going, the screen game is going to be going completely, with David Montgomery and with Gibbs. I think that to put Goff even lower on the list, this is a slam dunk of a pick.
I was going to say, this is ranking Jared Goff as a free agent and not getting drafted at all. Just leave him on there and maybe you pick him up once in a while. Jared Goff should be on rosters, no doubt about it. Like you said, Brett, quarterback 10 last season. He's a really solid backup option in a pass-heavy offense. That's anything you want in fantasy football. A pass-heavy offense, and he added Jahmyr Gibbs, who might be one of the best PPR running backs in all of fantasy football once he comes in and gets going. I mean, Jared Goff being 21 I think it might be the worst of the three between Wilson, Smith, and Jared Goff.
That one really doesn't make sense. And, it might be a guy that I even reach on. And I don't wait till the last round of my draft where somebody might take a flyer on him. I might take him in the second to last round, or even the third to last round, as that wave of quarterbacks starts to come. You might get some looks just if people are looking at the ranking sheets. But at the same time, I think you're getting a guy that's, has the potential to be a really good starter for you, especially on those weeks when, your top end quarterback is on a bye.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
All right, so now we go to the next one, and it's Kenny Pickett. Now, listen, Kenny Pickett right now, he's ranked 172, which I think is fair. He's quarterback 19. So, again, one of the second-tier quarterbacks. But at the same time, I think that it's another guy that you might be able to take a chance on that has some upside. He started to figure out he uses his legs towards the end of the year. Again, he's probably still a backup for you, but at the same time, I think it's a step forward for him this year.
I completely agree. And the reason I have him on this list also is it wasn't a flashy first season for him, but he's heading into year 2 now. That's where Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence. I mean, we've seen year after year after year, second-year quarterbacks really start to thrive, and they take that next step. I think Kenny Pickett can be maybe the next guy on that list and start to get things going. The great rushing ability that he has, you mentioned it, Brett. I mean, he also has some really strong options at receiver and at tight end. Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, they added Allen Robinson, and he also has Pat Freiermuth there. I mean, some great options. Najee Harris also at running back. He's in a really strong offense. They cleaned up the offensive line. I think second year, Kenny Pickett definitely could get it going.
Yeah, definitely. And now we go to another guy. And listen, Bryce Young, the jury's out on Bryce Young in terms of a redraft value right now. From a dynasty perspective, we've spoken at length about how he is the top rookie quarterback in this draft, in this rookie class, ahead of Anthony Richardson, ahead of CJ Stroud. But at the same time, now we look at from the redraft value, he's probably a really solid quarterback too. And the fact that he is ranked quarterback 24 at 243 overall is also kind of crazy, I think. And it is a guy that a lot of people are going to take a flyer on late in their drafts. And so, try to be that guy, because the second that they figure out, oh, Bryce Young uses legs, I think that the value is going to be there, and people are going to try to get him from you. Even if you take a late round flyer on him, I think that the guy that we're going to try to acquire.
Yeah, and the thing that stands out for Bryce Young this year, I'm looking at the rushing ability and the athleticism that he can bring. He's not going to be the guy that's throwing 60-yard bombs down the field. That's not going to be Bryce Young. You're going to get the fantasy value from his rushing ability. I think this offense is going to focus heavily on the run. They signed Miles Sanders to come in next to Bryce Young. I think they're going to focus on the run game a lot and just start to get him going and help him learn in the NFL. Like you said, Brett, I mean, take a late round flyer on Bryce Young. It's worth it. If he doesn't pan out, then he's on the end of your bench. He's your last pick. Take a shot on him and just hold him there.
Yeah, I mean, and we talked about his receivers as well, and we're going to talk about Adam Thielen in a little bit. But, you know, the fact that he has a guy who's so reliable in the red zone, I think also helps his case. He will get some touchdowns deep just from the fact that a guy like Thielen can get open deep.
Yeah, completely.
All right, so now we're going to jump into the running backs, and we start with one of the biggest running backs. It's Jamaal Williams. And Zach, take us through Jamaal Williams, who's at 105 as running back number 36.
This guy is, in my mind, the top sleeper on the board, and I don't think it's even close at this moment in time. I'm looking at the Alvin Kamara situation. We don't know what's going to happen July 31st court date. I mean, anything can happen. He might not play this season. We don't know at this moment in time. Take a shot on Jamaal Williams, and you could even reach on him. 36th for running backs. This guy could end up top 20 depending on what happens with Alvin Kamara. Like I said, he's the top sleeper on the board, and I think the ceiling is around the 20s, I would say.
Yeah, and right now he's ranked in the 11th round, and I think that's very low for him from an ESPN rank standpoint. He wrote when we came up with this list, I wrote the sleeper because I agree with you. I think that if Kamara is not there, we've seen over the years Lat Murray, Mark Ingram, those guys would take off when Kamara missed weeks. And so I think it's going to be a similar kind of role here. Listen, Jamaal Williams, he was an absolute monster last year. He took the role as the goal line back with the Lions. He carried the ball a league high 41 times inside the 10-yard line, had 13 rushing touchdowns. He finished the year with a league high 17 rushing touchdowns. So I think that that's the role that he will play, even if Kamara is there. But at the same time, if Kamara does miss time, like just watch out because Williams, he's going to slide all the way up board. So if your draft is within the next couple weeks, grab it before that July 31st date, because in the standpoint that, you know, Kamara does end up missing some NFL time, and we'll, you know, find out obviously over the next few weeks what the deal is. He's not going to go in the 11th round. He'll slide up the boards.
Yeah, this is just, it's way too low. I mean, 105, you're stretching it a bit, like he's barely going to do anything this year. I mean, he's going to be very involved in this offense that focuses a lot on the run once again.
All right, so now we go to a question mark here, and it's Samaje Perine. He's 96 overall, running back number 33. Zach, take us through Samaje.
So you look at this one, and it might be a little bit similar to Jamaal Williams in that Javonte Williams most likely not going to start the season. We still don't know. There's a lot of question marks. Sean Payton seems to be the only optimistic one of anybody that Javonte Williams will be there at the start of this season. I'm not buying it. I think Samaje Perine at this moment in time, he's the number one. He ranks 33rd in ESPN's rankings. And I mean, right now he's the number one guy. Like I said, in Denver, Javonte is practicing on a very limited basis. So looking at Perine, he could be a guy to look out for. Just to start off the season, he's going to be the top running back.
And I'm going to go point right back at what I said a few minutes ago, and it's look at the coach and look at the history of the coach. He loves using the screen game, and I think that that's where you're going to get a lot of these PPR points, especially, yes, if Javonte is not healthy. Samaje Perine is a guy that could have a big impact. That said, I think that if I had the choice between Jamaal Williams at 105 or Samaje Perine at 96, and I was on the clock and it was, you know, both guys were available in the 10th round, I probably would take Jamaal Williams at this moment But at the same time, I can understand where people are going for Samaje Perine. Listen, it's a risk for both of them. But at the same time, I think that if you compare the two, Williams probably has a bigger role if his guy if Kamara is healthy, rather than if Samaje Perine is there with Javonte being healthy.
I agree with you. I mean, Williams is most likely going to be more involved than the two, no matter what the injury situation or the situation is with Kamara. Williams is definitely the top guy, but Perine is also a sleeper at this moment in time because we don't know if Javonte is going to start off the season.
All right, so now we've been talking a little bit of Seahawks, and we talk about Rashad Penny, a former Seahawk. Now he goes to a new team. He's 118 overall and RB 39. He could be a really big steal in this year's draft. Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you just look at the Philly running backs from last year, and Miles Sanders was the lead guy. Yes, he got a ton of rushing progress, but Kenneth Gainwell was there. Boston Scott got some opportunities. I think Rashad Penny this year, Philly's going to get all of their running backs involved. Kenneth Gainwell's still there as well. Boston Scott is also still there. Rashad Penny, though, takes a step up, and he's probably running back 2 behind DeAndre Swift. I think Swift, you can see more PPR value. And yes, he has the rushing ability. I think he's there more as a receiving back. I think you get more involved in the passing game right next to Jalen Hurts, who loves to throw the ball. He's got some weapons out there in Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. But Rashad Penny could be that goal line back and that guy reliable inside the 10. I mean, he's got a big body. I think that can help Philly this year next to Jalen Hurts. Teams are going to start to figure out Jalen Hurts' QB sneaks. It's about time that some defenses figure that out. But I think Rashad Penny could get a lot of touchdowns inside the 10 as that pure running back.
Yeah, and again, listen, he's getting in pick right now in the back end of the 12th round. And so to have that kind of a role in that kind of an offense, I think it's a total steal. He kind of got pigeonholed into this midfield back, and then they would vulture him at the goal line. And so he never really scored touchdowns from inside the 10. 7 of his touchdowns in his career, 50% of those were 30 plus yard plays from scrimmage. 14 career touchdowns, and 11 of them came outside the 10-yard line. So I think now the fact that you can add in that goal line work, I think it's a steal. I think that that's a guy that they're going to utilize a lot. They really wanted him. And so, yeah, I think that in that kind of a running offense, again, you just mentioned Jalen Hurts. People are going to figure out, what's going on there and when he's going to run and not. I'm sure we'll have a lot of read options. And a lot of them will end up going to Penny.
Yeah, and it could be frustrating. It could be frustrating to be in that offense. There's just so many different options. But Penny, like we said, he could get those touchdowns, and that's where his value comes from.
Yeah, so now let's jump to a guy who is 3 spots behind him overall at 121. He's running back 42. And again, this is an interesting case in Seattle. It's Zach Charbonnet. And Zach, what do you think about the competition between him and Kenneth Walker III?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of experts looking at it right now, and Kenneth Walker, we might talk about it next week. He's an overvalued guy right now. I mean, he's running back 17 on boards, and Zach Charbonnet at number 42. This is going to be a battle in preseason. There's no doubt about that. Zach Charbonnet could be a starting running back in the NFL. He has that ability, a really strong, pure running back who can do a lot in the passing game as well. He's ranked 42nd among the running backs, 121. Like you said, Brett, so, I mean, that's pretty late, 12th, 13th round. If you could get a guy like Zach Charbonnet, a rookie who's going to be involved in a run-heavy offense. He's the number 2 running back in a run-heavy offense. I mean, he's going to get a workload, and if you could get him in the 13th round, that's an absolute steal.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is everybody still seems to think that Kenneth Walker is going to be the guy and 100% the guy. So I think you might even be able to get Charbonnet later than that. A lot of people are shying away from him just based on that. Listen, they picked this guy second round of the draft. It's not like they used a seventh rounder on him. They picked him in the second round. They put a lot of draft capital into it. Pete Carroll's history, they picked Rashad Penny in the first round, but seventh rounder Chris Carson was the team's leading rusher for 3 years. So I think there's a ton of upside. I think will out. I think that for the start, you'll probably see a 50-50 split. You know, they'll try to use guys in different ways, but at the same time, yeah, it's very run heavy right now. And I think the fact that they got those weapons that we spoke about with Geno, like, is going to help them with the running game and even the screen game. I think they're going to utilize the screen game a lot. Little dump offs and things like that to the running back.
Yeah, and Brett, we always talk about the importance of a stash guy. I mean, even as the number 2 in this offense, you grab Zach Charbonnet. What happens if Kenneth Walker picks up an injury? Then you have a guy in Zach Charbonnet that could do absolutely anything he wants in that backfield.
Yeah, and we saw it last year with Rashad Penny. I mean, everybody grabbed Kenneth Walker late, and then all of a sudden he took off that 1 week, and it was off to the races for him. So I think it's a similar situation here, and with the Seahawks, obviously they wanted to double down on in the case that does happen, that one of those guys does go down, they have somebody behind that can be workhorse, and I think they got that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And let's move to our next guy, and that's Jerick McKinnon in Kansas City. Right now, he ranks 38th among running backs, a very talented receiving back in that Kansas City offense, 114th in ESPN rankings. Brett, what do you think about Jerick McKinnon? Could he be a really good steal in drafts this year?
Yeah, so listen, I think that he's a good later round player. I think that him coming back to the Chiefs definitely helped Pacheco's value. I think that that's kind of right now the needle in the side of Jerick McKinnon and the upside that he has. That said, they used him a lot in the passing game as well. And so I think that they're going to continue doing that. He's a guy that you're probably, grabbing again later in the draft. He's right now ranked in the 12th round. And so I think that that's about fair. I wouldn't read on him. You, again, probably could wait an extra round on him and he'll still be there on the board. But he does have a lot of upside just from the touchdown standpoint and the passing game standpoint. I think that anytime you have a quarterback like that, it just obviously takes your value and makes it higher.
Exactly. And just being in that offense gives him the value. That's what I was going to say. For Jerick McKinnon, yeah, this is a good spot right now, like 12th roundish. He ranks 38th among running backs, like I said. But this guy was running back 2 the last 6 weeks of the season. He was getting more receiving touches than Christian McCaffrey in that time span. It was pretty ridiculous, the numbers he was able to put up. I think it could be pretty similar because I think he's the top receiving back definitely in that offense with Pacheco as the lead pure running back in Kansas City's offense. McKinnon is a guy to look out for in the later rounds.
Yeah, and even from a dynasty perspective, I still think he's one of those buy low candidates. And just based on the fact that people look at a guy like Pacheco and said, oh, well, he's the guy. But you're discounting how the Chiefs offense is always run, which is they love using multiple running backs. I mean, they got Clyde Edwards-Helaire still on the roster. And so, I think that discount the value is very short-sighted.
Yeah, completely.
All right, so now we go a little bit more up the board as we head into the 60s with 2 guys here. Let's start off at number 5 overall, running back number 24. It's J.K. Dobbins. This one also is a little bit of a wild card. Only played 8 games, touchdowns. I'm probably going to stay away from him, but if he slips a little bit, I think that it's a guy that I would jump on.
I completely agree with you. I think this is a good value spot right now, just based on it. There's so many question marks. You do not know what's going to happen in that Baltimore offense. Obviously, Lamar Jackson's a very heavy running quarterback, so Dobbins may not get those opportunities. But 24th right now among running backs, I think that's a good spot. If he drops any lower, like you said, Brett, just jump on him because he's going to get his points. He's the lead running back in this offense. It's a run-heavy offense, like I mentioned. Like I said, a lot of questions, but he's still ranked a little bit low for a number 1 running back in a run-heavy offense.
Yeah, and the fact that he is in a run heavy offense, I think that really boosts his value. Obviously, they brought in Todd Monken, and so he's the offensive coordinator now. Loves a lot of passing plays, and that's kind of his MO. And so I think that's what's out there right now. And so it's kind of scaring people away from a guy like J. Dobbins. But at the same time, listen, if Dobbins can stay healthy, I think that offense has always been a run heavy offense. And so, yeah, they add a guy like Flowers, and they bring back Bateman, who was hurt last year. But at the same time, I think that Dobbins, his value at 65 is good. I'll probably pass and wait an extra round. And if he's there, then that's great. Pounce on him. But, there's a lot of question marks right now with him.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. He could end up dropping at a couple rounds just based on people are a little bit worried. They don't want to take the chance on him. If you get him a little bit lower than his value, you should definitely take a shot on him. As we said, he's the lead running back in this offense.
Yeah, and the reason I would not take him is based on a guy who's just ranked a couple spots. It's Dave Montgomery. I truly think that David Montgomery is going to end up with as many points as Gibbs, if not more this year. Obviously, Gibbs is an animal, and from a dynasty perspective, he's going to be a monster. You should take him early. But at the same time, I think for this year specifically, Monty's going to be the guy at the goal line.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you look at the numbers from last season, obviously two different running backs, but Jamal Williams was running back 13. DeAndre Swift was running back 21, outside the top 20. And yes, Swift played, I think, 3 less games than Jamal Williams last season. But still, the value for the goal line back is a little bit there for, and maybe a little bit higher than the rookie running back who's still getting used to the offense. Of course, Gibbs is going to be involved. I'm not saying don't draft Gibbs, but you definitely have to be a tiny bit worried about those goal line opportunities because David Montgomery, just like Jamal Williams last year, is that big, pure running back who will punch the ball into the end zone. And that's going to maybe hurt Gibbs's value just a little bit. A sleeper, Montgomery definitely is. I think 26 is a good spot for him. I don't think I would go any higher just based on he's probably the number 2 running back in this offense. I would say, though, the goal line situations, he's going to get a ton of touchdowns this year.
And listen, I'm not sure how much I would suggest it, but last year there was a lot of guys who were a lot of people in the fantasy community who were saying, well, if you get Aaron Jones, go get AJ Dillon. And so that way, if one becomes the guy, you have them. I'm not totally recommending that if you get Gibbs, get Montgomery, but at the same time, if you're very high on getting Gibbs, then at least look at the potential of taking David Montgomery in the 8th round where he would be projected.
Yeah, so that you make a good point there. If he's there in the 8th round and he's available, then definitely pounce on him because he's a stash guy, or you could even plug him in as a flex guy. I mean, you never know. You could root for both of them each week. I know that's a little bit challenging, but this offense, they're gonna be focusing on both guys, and they're gonna get their opportunities. So take advantage of it.
Yeah, and just like we spoke about the Seahawks, the second that one of those guys goes down, the other one's going to take off. And so that's another reason why I would say, lean into potentially taking both of them.
Yeah, completely agree.
All right, so now my favorite sleeper of the entire exercise, and it's number 6 overall, Bijan Robinson. And hear me out. I put this one on the list. For some reason, I think that it goes Bijan, and we were speaking about this off stream about the value of running backs early in drafts. I think there's a potential that you pick a running back in the 1st round over a wide receiver. And I understand Justin Jefferson's value. I understand Cooper Kupp's value. I understand Jamar Chase's value. I don't know how I would compare them, though, to the rest of the receivers when I compare guys like McCaffrey and Eckler to the rest of the running backs. I think that Bijan, for me, listen, if you get him at 7 overall, I think that's a slam dunk. And for me, I think that classifies as a sleeper. If you're valuing him lower than where or you're valuing him higher than where his ADP is. And so for me, I think that Bijan right now, listen, if you get him in the back end of your first round, you're really happy, because I think this is a good finish as number one guy in all of fantasy.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely understand. He could be a sleeper based on expectations and where people are projecting him to go in drafts. I mean, I think this guy, if he stays healthy, he's in the top 3 of running backs by the end of this year. He just has the ability. They're gonna give him the ball most of the time in this Atlanta offense because they don't have much more with Desmond Ridder at quarterback. Still some question marks there. They're going to rely on their running back in Bijan Robinson, who can do almost everything in the running game and the passing game. He's a really talented player, and I understand having him as a sleeper just because I think he should be going top 4, and if not top 3. Like, he's right there with the top guys on the board in McCaffrey and Eckler, and I can understand taking a guy like Bijan over the wide receivers and the top guys on the board over there.
Yeah, I'm going to throw one in here on a wide receiver, Cooper Kupp. I think that Cooper Kupp right now is being valued too low as well. The guy that they're valuing, Jamar Chase, they're valuing Justin Jefferson. Yes, we can say Justin Jefferson is the top guy, but the fact that Kupp is also, listen, I did a couple mock drafts this past week. Kupp wasn't going till like the 6th or 7th pick also. I'm not sure how much I buy that. I think that he's a guy also that can go higher in the first round. And if you get him towards back end of your first round, you're pretty happy with the guy that was getting a ton of targets and obviously was the favorite target in a passing offense with Akers and things like that. But do you buy that as well?
I agree with you because I'm one of those people that, and we'll talk about our tips for redraft in a couple of weeks. I'm one of those people that loves taking running backs early. I love taking running backs, getting that position solid. I think there's not too much of a difference between the wide receivers, and you can go really anywhere. A guy that's maybe ranked wide receiver 5 now may only be 20 points higher than a guy who's wide receiver 20. That's how I look at the wide receivers. I think it's a bit of a difference with those top echelon bit of running backs. I think it's definitely something to look out for. I would say Cooper Kupp is a guy that may drop a tiny bit based on injury worries in the first round. You could pounce on him. Definitely.
Yeah. Let's actually go off of first round, because obviously, when we speak sleepers, obviously it makes sense when you take the ADP and you value them higher. But as far as those mid-round sleepers, we're going to dive into some of those now. And let's go to wide receiver 53, 124. We just spoke about him. It's Adam Thielen. I'm not sure how Adam Thielen is always valued so low. And every single year, people bang the table for him, and he still goes really low. So to get him in the 13th round is crazy to me. I would pick him even higher than that. And I'm just taking a chance on the upside flex.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really think this is super disrespectful. I really do. I think this guy finished wide receiver 30 as the number 2 guy behind Justin Jefferson last year. He's in an offense now with Bryce Young. Yes, Bryce Young's young and he's going to start learning in the NFL, but Adam Thielen is by far the top red zone target on the Panthers this season. It's not even close. They have an easy strength of schedule as well. I mean, everything points to it's going to be a solid year. We're not expecting like fantastic season from Adam Thielen, but wide receiver 53 is very disrespectful at this time.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're not expecting, just like you said, we're not expecting him to shoot for the moon. But in the 13th round, I think you're going to get a way higher value. He might not be a top 4 rounds player, but at the same time, like that next tier, like he belongs in there. And so just from the red zone value alone, I think that Thielen holds a ton of weight. That's that I'm going to circle on my board, and hopefully I get him before you do. But Adam Thielen, definitely a big sleeper.
Yeah, definitely. We'll both be looking out for him.
Yeah. So let's jump into another guy and a change of scenery, but it's not a change of quarterback. Wide receiver number 50, 110 overall on the ESPN rankings list. It's Allen Lazard with the Jets. And yes, he has Aaron Rodgers back. There's the threat of Garrett Wilson, but I'm not quite sure that Lazard is going to be outside of the top 50.
Yeah, I mean, 50 is just a little bit low for me. I think you look at it, he's probably the second wide receiver. I mean, I don't see anybody taking that spot from him. In New York, Garrett Wilson's clearly the number one guy. We can get that out of the way. He's outstanding. He's going to be great this year. He's going to build chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. Allen Lazard at number 50 already has great chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. He's played with him for a while back in Green Bay. Defenses will try to double Garrett Wilson. There's no doubt in my mind. He's that talented. I mean, Allen Lazard's the next best guy on the board, and he's with Aaron Rodgers, who he has, like I said, great chemistry with from their time in Green Bay.
Yeah, listen, when we previewed the Jets a few weeks back, and again, go check out that episode, I spoke about how Garrett Wilson will be, and their teams are going to try to take him out, especially when you play like the Patriots twice, where Belichick always leans into what is their biggest strength. Well, right now it's going to be the passing game because they just brought in Aaron Rodgers. So I think that a guy like Lazard really is going to flourish in that. And we saw that the last couple of years with Corey Davis of where his value was. And obviously it's not there anymore, but you know, they would go after other guys and Corey Davis all of a sudden would take over as the target monster. He became the favorite target of Sam Darnold, of Zach Wilson. And so I think that that's going to kind of be the same kind of thing here with Allen Lazard. I think that there's going to score a lot of touchdowns, but it's for me, it's those middle of the field, open, you know, wide open in the middle of the field catches over the middle. Aaron Rodgers and Lazard really have figured that one out in Green Bay. I think that that's going to continue.
Yeah, I mean, over the middle, he's a really strong target. He can also go deep with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he's shown that plenty of times back in Green Bay. It's just a really solid option for a guy who you could get in the 12th round, who's the second wide receiver in a pass-heavy, we would have to say, offense this year.
Yeah, and just a guy just going off of this list, I'd just kind of keep an eye on is also Mecole Hardman. I think that that's another guy that's going to line up in the slot. They got rid of Elijah Moore, and so it's another over the middle. Like he hasn't played with Aaron Rodgers, but he gets open over the middle, and he's done it for his whole career. And so it's another guy just to keep an eye on, and you know, probably wouldn't even be able to be taken in a draft. You know, it's a late round flyer, maybe last round of your draft. If not, you grab him on waivers. But definitely see the same kind of value as what Allen Lazard has. And so obviously to a lower level, but keep an eye on Allen Lazard. And I would take him obviously in the 12th round. I think he's also ranked kind of higher. But a guy who's now left in the dust without those two guys back in Green Bay is Romeo Doubs. Now listen, Romeo Doubs right now is ranked 86th in wide receivers. He's ranked 230th overall. Zach, you have him in Dynasty, and I think you're pretty happy with the rumblings that he could potentially be the number one guy.
So, yeah, I'm going to bring up that one. It's Saturday today. On Tuesday, ESPN's Rob Demovsky, he's the Packers reporter. He reported that Romeo Doubs has, quote, has seemingly become quarterback Jordan Love's go-to guy. I mean, what else do you need to know? He's wide receiver 86. Take a shot on him. I mean, late rounds, go ahead. I know he's the second wide receiver, probably behind Christian Watson. I know they drafted another rookie as well. I think Romeo Doubs, if he's the go-to guy for Jordan Love, I mean, have a shot at it. He's a late round flyer, no doubt. I'm very happy with having him. But I think even with Jaden Reed, Jordan Reed from Washington a while ago, Jaden Reed, he's still their number 2 wide receiver. Doubs is just based on he knows the offense. He's used to it. And yes, it's a different quarterback than Aaron Rodgers. But if they're saying he's the go-to guy, take a shot on him. Why not?
Yeah, completely. And I think that we'll figure out, obviously, pretty quickly whether it's news or noise. But at the same time, listen, even if he's the number 2 guy, I still think that he had a lot of value last year. And yes, obviously he had Aaron Rodgers. He's going to a new quarterback. But Jordan Love is not a schlub. They wouldn't have got rid of the Aaron Rodgers saga if they thought that they were just going to go into a full rebuild and the quarterback wasn't being a contender of what the Packers want to be. And so for me, yeah, listen, Dobbs at 86, wide receiver 6, 230 overall. I'm very puzzled by that. It's a guy that I'm definitely going to take a look at in drafts.
Yeah, and we could, based on these reports, see him shoot up some draft boards and some draft rankings. So, I mean, if you're drafting pretty soon, if he's at wide receiver 86, take him in the last round. It's all good.
Yeah, completely. All right, so we go across the division to Minnesota. Jordan Addison right now, he's ranked number 100 on the dot, wide receiver 45. Again, he's got good mid-round value, that 9th to 11th. I'm sure he'll end up in most drafts. But at the same time, I think the upside's there. Listen, we just spoke about it a couple minutes ago with Adam Thielen about what it means to be the number 2 guy behind Justin Jefferson. I think we see a lot of that here.
Yeah, completely. And I mean, Jordan Addison's in a good spot, I would say. Maybe you could put him a little bit higher in the wide receiver rankings, but 45 right now, 100 overall. If you get him in 10th, 11th round, I mean, that's a good pick at that time, just based on like you said, Brett, Adam Thielen did a good job. He was wide receiver 30 last year as the number 2 guy behind Justin Jefferson. Addison's going to slot in and replace Thielen. He's in a perfect spot on the opposite side to get some really strong numbers this year. Addison, he's a big target, a guy that they could look at in the red zone as well. I definitely think taking a shot on him in the 10th and 11th round where he's ranked is a really good pick.
Yeah, and again, I would take that 9th round. I think that this is a guy that will be one of those wide receivers that ends up as one of the good values of this draft cycle. Again, it was a great landing spot because Adam Thielen was on his way out, and they're still leaning into the pass. Listen, they got rid of Dalvin Cook. I think that's going to help him. I'm not sure how much they're going to lean into Madison as a full workhorse. I think that they're going to kind of mix the run and the pass, just kind of like what we've done the last couple of years. So I think that kind of opens up the door for Addison to actually have a larger role than what people are even looking at. We spoke a couple of years ago with Jamar Chase and what that would look like. And listen, he was a guy that was being picked in like the 6th round, and he ended up being one of the top receivers in fantasy. So, not saying that Addison's going to be the top receiver in fantasy, but at the same time, being the second guy to a guy like Justin Jefferson definitely holds a lot of weight, because if he can get open, he's going to get the ball too.
Yeah, and just going off one thing you said, I do think that Madison's not going to get the heavy workload that Dalvin Cook got each and every year. They have a ton of options in the passing game. TJ Hawkinson now at tight end with Justin Jefferson, the lead wide receiver. Addison's probably the 3rd guy of those guys, and they're going to want to throw the ball a lot, especially with Kirk Cousins. The career may be coming to an end pretty soon. The arm's going to wear out at some point. Get it out now and get those guys moving in the passing game.
Yeah, so now let's jump over to the FC. Jahan Dotson, he's ranked wide receiver 37, 82 overall. And I think this is a good potential flyer. Listen, Terry McLaurin was okay last year. I wouldn't say he was great. He was good. He was a good receiver. But at the same time, I think Dotson really has the potential to be a great receiver.
Yeah, I agree with you. And people stay away from Washington a lot just based on the quarterback questions each and every year. Heineke's gone now. It could be Sam Howell, who's most likely going to be the starter week 1 this year. I mean, I'm looking at Dotson. I think I have a lot of confidence that it could be a breakout second year for him. I think he has that potential. He showed it at Penn State all those years. His ability on the deep ball, he's very, very strong and can get open very easily. He has that ability. He's definitely worth a later round pick. As I would say, he's the wide receiver 2 in this offense. I think he goes ahead of Samuel this year. I think Dotson, if you can get him, you're in a really good spot. You could even just hold him just on the edge of your bench and into the flex spot. I think that's a really good spot for him.
Yeah, and I think this is another guy that's probably going to slip out of the 9th round in a lot of drafts just based on people are scared of the quarterback. I think the quarterback's going to be good and a suitable quarterback. He's not going to be great, but he's going to be a suitable quarterback. And so I think that I like Dotson probably will be there in the 10th round, I would guess, as people pass on him in that 9th round.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned the quarterback concerns. We don't know at this time who's going to be that starter, but it will fill in pretty well, you would have to say. I mean, it's going to be solid. They're going to get targets in this offense.
Yeah. Now, a guy who doesn't have any quarterback questions whatsoever is Rashee Rice. He's wide receiver 66, 170 overall. This is obviously, we don't know who the number one is. We never really do, other than Travis Kelce. But at the same time, I think that for Rashee Rice's case, what do we think of him? The sky limit.
I mean, this guy's ranked 170 right now. He's not being drafted or last round in a lot of 10-team drafts. Like it is a big question mark of who's going to be the number one wide receiver. I said to you a couple of weeks ago, Brett, I think Rashee Rice has a real shot to be the number one wide receiver in this offense. Chiefs GM Brett Veach said he actually envisions Rice as the slot guy replacing Juju from last year. I mean, that's a great spot. Obviously, we know that Mahomes loves to throw it in the middle of the field because Kelce's there. Give Rashee Rice some targets in there. This is a really good late round flyer. Take a shot on him. We spoke. We had questions about Sky Moore last year. It didn't pan out. I think there's a big difference between Rashee Rice and Sky Moore, and Rice will be the better of the two heading into this year.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, there's a lot of hype right now going on about Sky Moore. I'm not really buying it. I'm just not. I think that Rashee Rice has the upside. We spoke about him a couple weeks ago with the rookie draft. I think it's a guy that you take, and especially at 170 overall. I think that's some great value. That's a guy that can go off a couple weeks, and then Mahomes figures out, hey, this kid's good, and starts throwing to him. Right now, their number one is Kadarius Toney. It is projected to be Kadarius Toney, and so I'm not really sure that Kadarius Toney is going to end up being the one. I think that they're probably going to spread the ball. Obviously, he'll go to Kelce, and that'll all be well and good. But as far as the receiver standpoint, the chance that Rashee Rice ends up as the top receiver in Kansas City.
Yeah, the thing about Kansas City is they have a lot of players that gadget type of players and can do some tricks in that offense. I think Kadarius Toney fits in that. I think Sky Moore fits in that. Rashee Rice is like a pure wide receiver, I feel like. And that's going to help him in this offense, I believe, to replace a guy like Juju, who was a bit of the same last year.
Yeah, so now let's jump across the country and we go to Baltimore. Rashad Bateman. It's a guy that we've spoken a ton about in the last few weeks, of question marks of who is going to be the guy there as the number one receiver with Flowers, Odell. But he's ranked wide receiver 67 at 171 overall. Listen, there's a lot of hype right now on Flowers, and I think that Bateman slipping through the cracks, and to get him in of the 18th round, I mean, I wouldn't hesitate in taking Rashad Bateman.
Neither would I, and I have him on my dynasty team. I'm looking forward to a solid year. I'm not expecting anything spectacular, just based on he's still in that Baltimore offense, and I think that now they have a little bit more options, and it's a bit more crowded. But I mean, 171 is a bit low in my opinion. Wide receiver 67. This guy. I mean, people have concerns about the injuries, and that's why they might be staying away. Also, he's in that offense that doesn't throw the ball a lot with Lamar at quarterback. But you just mentioned they added a new offensive coordinator who's going to focus on the pass. I mean, that's a perfect spot for Rashad Bateman, who knows Lamar Jackson, has been in this offense for a little bit. I mean, he knows Lamar the best of any of these targets at wide receiver. I don't think there's a chance he should go undrafted in fantasy this year. That's where people have him going just on the edge of it. I mean, it's a little bit too low for me. I think Bateman, you can take a flyer on him and he's going to pan out for you.
Yeah, and listen, I just said that there was a lot of hype on Flowers. There's also a lot of hype on Odell. And so, to me, it is even further down. Odell's probably a guy I might even avoid this year in drafts, just based on the sense of we're not really sure what he's going to be, based on the age, based on how fast is he coming off of the injury. And he wasn't ready at the end of the year last year. He didn't want to rush it, and then he ended up not signing. And so, to me, I think that Bateman still holds the most value of the three. And yeah, listen, I understand the whole hype on Flowers. At the same time, I think from reliability standpoint, just like you said, I think now would be the guy that I want of those three.
Yeah, completely. And defenses are going to trend towards Odell, you would have to say, of the wide receiver group. And that leads to opportunities for those two guys in Flowers and Bateman.
Completely. Now to our favorite team in this exercise, the Denver Broncos. Jerry Jeudy right now is wide receiver 26, 54 overall. I think there's right now a lot of hate just based on the Russell Wilson thing. But at the same time, I think that this is his number one guy. If we just concern talent alone, this is the number one guy on his team. And I think that Sean Payton really tries to get him involved more.
Yeah, this one's confusing to me because Jerry Jeudy was wide receiver 22 last year, and they didn't have a good season. Now he's wide receiver 26. How does that happen? I mean, it does not make sense. If you can get Jerry Jeudy from on the edge of 5th round into the 6th round in 10 or 12 team leagues, I mean, you got to steal here. He's the number one guy. He showed that he's built that chemistry with Russell Wilson. It shouldn't be a problem heading into this year. He's the number one wide. He's an absolute steal, like I said. Wide receiver 22 in a bad offense last year. People may say, oh, okay, Courtland Sutton could be better this year. I still think Jerry Jeudy is going to get that value. I'd be shocked if Jerry Jeudy didn't finish in the top 20.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that, listen, we just spoke about it was his worst year. And, Jerry Jeudy was 35th in the league in target share. I think that number goes up. I think that he'd be higher just based on the fact that I think Russell Wilson's going to be a better quarterback this year, plain and simple. So to be able to grab a guy like Jerry Jeudy in the 6th round is pretty good. I would be happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, he's a wide receiver 2. He's a wide receiver 2 on your roster. I wouldn't put him in wide receiver 1 range just yet, but he's a wide receiver 2 and has a ton of upside.
Yeah, completely. And especially if running back situation isn't figured out by the start of the season, I think they lean into the pass more just to kind of lighten the load on the backs.
Yeah, I completely agree.
All right, so now let's jump into the tight ends. We start out with tight end 989, Evan Engram. It's a guy we've spoken about a few times now on this podcast, and I think the volume is still there. Listen, there's the whole talk about Calvin Ridley coming in. We're unsure about what the targets are going to be. He was top 10 last year as a tight end, 73 catches, 766 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's the low-end tight end 1, high-end tight end 2. At the same time, I think you take a chance on him just based on the volume might end up being there.
Yeah, I think he's in that group of tight ends that you wouldn't take any earlier than like the 6th round. You would focus on those upper echelon of tight ends, but he's in that next group where maybe you're on the back end of the tight ends and picking tight ends. And if Evan Ingram's still there, then why not? I mean, he's in that range at 89 overall. I mean, that's 9th round at this time. So it's a perfect spot to grab your tight end if you're, like I said, on the back end of picking a tight end. He finished tight end 5 last year and is a really solid option as a tight end 1. That's why he's a sleeper right now. And in that offense, they love to throw the ball. And Trevor Lawrence showed last year that he can throw the ball and he has a ton of options. Adding Ridley will definitely help this offense. And you look at Christian Kirk still there. Where Ingram's targets come in, I think a little bit of Zay Jones's targets from last year. I think Ingram starts to replace some of those.
Completely. And again, I just think the upside makes it one of the second wave tight ends that you want to grab. That's the guy you want to grab of that second wave. So now we kind of jump a little bit down the board for the rest of these guys in terms of being just about 150, if not later in the draft. We're going to start off Denver, of course, and Greg Dulcich. To me, he's a good sleeper option. Listen, the history of tight ends with Russell Wilson isn't amazing, but at the same time, I think Dulcich really proved himself, beating out the competition last season and actually getting to take the number one role this year.
Yeah, he's a backup. We'll just say that at first. He is a backup tight end on your fantasy rosters, but he was tight end 10 in the 10 games, that he played last season. Tight end 10, that's perfect. Even with, yes, there was a couple question marks, things going on in Denver, but he still ended up in the top 10 of tight ends when he was playing. So you look at that, I think it's a good option as a backup. Maybe if you're taking a guy like Evan Ingram, then you take a guy like Greg Dulcich a little bit after that. And I mean, you have two solid tight ends at that time. So he's in that area. I think 20 is a little bit too low for him. I think he's going to be a little bit more involved in this offense.
Yeah, and of course, the competition last year was Albert Okwuegbunam, the name that just rolls right off your tongue. So Okwuegbunam, I mean, listen, there was talk that they were going to cut, plain and simple, last year and trade at the trade deadline. There was all of that. And so I think they really like Dulcich. And obviously that was a different coaching staff. We'll see how he integrates into this coaching staff. But again, I'm going to go to history of the coach and what they did with Jimmy Graham. And they started to utilize that tight end position for all those years. I think that's kind of where you'll see the dump offs go. I think the dump offs are going to end up going to the tight end.
Yeah, and he's super young, a lot of athleticism, and the age definitely helps him out in this offense.
All right, so now I'm to another guy, and I feel like in the last couple of years, we've put him on the sleeper list every year. It's Gerald Everett. Right now, he's tight end 16, 138 overall. Zach, why do you like Gerald Everett?
It's pretty funny because I did have Gerald Everett the last 2 years on my sleeper board. He's a reliable target. He was in Seattle a couple of years ago. And yeah, he just hung out on my bench. I think one of my tight ends got hurt and he came in for a couple games, just did enough to be a reliable backup. Right now, he's in a really strong situation in Los Angeles, and he was pretty solid last year. He was top 10 in receptions last season. I expect the same with Herbert, loving to sling the ball around, loving to throw it to his options. Obviously, Eckler in the backfield gets a ton of targets in the passing game. Gerald Everett is a guy to look out for because Herbert really liked going to him, especially in the red zone last season.
Yeah, listen, reliability. I think that's kind of what comes to mind when you think Gerald Everett. Like, if you're in deep and you're throwing him the ball, he's going to catch it and score touchdowns. He's a great backup for your team. Again, he's tight end 16. I think that's a little bit of a fair value. But again, I would take a swing on him a little higher just based on he does have that borderline top 10 potential, career receptions and receiving yards. Obviously, the quarterback situation, he got hurt last year. And so, it was up in the air of ability, but at the same time, I think this year quarterback's healthy and Everett's going to be able to make an impact. He finished with 58 catches, 555 yards, and 4 touchdowns last year. I think that number goes up.
Yeah, completely. And in that offense, they really love to throw the ball around. Everett, I mean, that favors him, especially with how many receptions he was able to grab last year. Yeah.
So now we jump over to Juwan Johnson, another guy that we had on our list last year. We're going to put him again this year. Tight end 15, 137. List traded him to the Broncos. And Juwan Johnson, he finished as a top 15 option last year. I think this is a sneaky pickup.
I wish we told people last year about Juwan Johnson and we were able to tell the public about him. This guy finished tied for 3rd in touchdowns last season among tight ends, only behind Travis Kelce and George Kittle. That's perfect. That's exactly what you want in a backup tight end. He has a really strong case, in my opinion, as the number 2 option in this offense, in this passing game behind Chris Olave. Those reliable guys. I mean, Derek Carr coming in at quarterback, he's going to want to throw the ball around. I definitely think Juwan Johnson is a smart option.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, the new quarterback thing, I think helps him in this case, just from the standpoint of it's a reliable quarterback. Not to knock Jameis Winston or Andy Dalton, but I think that they've got a more reliable opportunity to get Juwan Johnson involved. And yeah, I mean, it's a sneaky pickup. I think that it's a guy who's right now ranked in the top 15 that could end up in the top 10 when it's all said and done. All right, now we're jumping into the next one. Okonkwo, I'm not so sure on him, but I can understand. Listen, he's tight end 18, 185 overall. That's good value at 185 to take a chance, late round flyer. Zach, what do you think about him?
So he's got a lot of hype from experts right now that he is going to be maybe the top tight end sleeper of the season. I mean, you just look, no more Austin Hooper in this offense. So he's gone. He went to Las Vegas. And now it's Chig Okonkwo. He's the number one guy. He's the number one tight end. 14.1 yards per reception. He led all tight ends last season. The big playability, he could get you some really good points. Just as a backup option, I mean, that's really solid. You would want that he's the number one tight end, like I said, in this offense. I mean, you can't always rely on Tennessee and Ryan Tannehill as the starting quarterback, but they are going to throw the ball, I think, a little bit more. They can't always rely on Derrick Henry to run all the time. I think Chig Okonkwo is going to get his opportunities. And if you take him as a backup, he's a solid sleeper on my board.
Yeah, I think that we spoke about it the last couple episodes about Tennessee and trying to lighten the workload for Derrick Henry. And we're going to start to see that cliff. I think that means there's going to be more opportunities for guys like Treylon Burks, guys like Okonkwo. I think that for me, he's a good backup with the potential of being a low-end starter for you, depending on how the early season shakes out. And listen, it's a late round flyer. So if it doesn't work out, recycle him for another guy on the waivers.
Exactly. That's the best thing about this. If it doesn't work out, then no, you took him late. Okay, then go grab the next guy.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's finish off with two rookie tight ends, and they're ranked right now pretty low. One way higher than the other, but start with Dalton Kincaid. Right now he's ranked tight end 17, 140. Listen, the hype is real right now for Kincaid of where he's going to line up in the slot, off the line, and will he line up out wide as a receiver? And he's done all of these things, and you know, obviously he knocks his value away. But at the same time, I still think that Kincaid, to rank him at 140 is kind of low.
I agree with you, and that could just be based on his first year, and he's a rookie, and he's getting used to it. And they may play two tight end offenses. I think Dawson Knox could be a little bit annoying. He's in that stretch and bother, maybe get some touchdowns off of Dalton Kincaid. But my thing with Dalton Kincaid, I wouldn't take him till maybe 12th round and up. I think that's probably a good spot for him. But if you can grab a guy like Kincaid who has the upside right now, heading into year one, the size, the athleticism in this offense, Josh Allen, if he throws it to him a couple times, he may fall in love with him and keep going to him. I think that's a really strong spot. And Kincaid, a rookie, but he's definitely a sleeper heading into this year.
Yeah, I'm taking a late round flyer on him. I mean, at 140, that's a good spot. And again, it might be a guy that I even jump on him just based on the upside. It's a guy that there's a lot of hype about him, and I'm kind of buying the dip right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like I said, Knox could be a little bit annoying, but Kincaid as a backup option and where you could get him right now, 15th round. I mean, that's a really strong pick.
Yeah. So now let's finish off with a guy that, from a rookie standpoint, I think that he's being underutilized and undervalued. But at the same time, I think from a redraft standpoint, he's being valued even lower. 257 and tight end 27. Sam Laporta. I think that he could end up being a top 10 tight end this year, just from the standpoint of what his situation is. And we saw what Hawkinson was able to do there. there's a ton of upside for him.
Yeah, this is my guy right here. I love him. I think he hasn't even played a game in the NFL. I think he's going to be really, really good, especially in this offense that loves to throw the ball around with Jared Goff at quarterback. The fact that this guy is at 257 is just, I mean, it's mind-boggling to me. He's going to be the number one tight end in a pass-heavy offense where TJ Hawkinson thrived year after year. I really think there's a solid chance that we're talking next year and Sam Laporta maybe finishes miles ahead of Dalton Kincaid. I think that's where we're at. I really have a lot of belief in Sam Laporta. And if you're taking him in the last round, you take him maybe second to last round, it's a really good pick for a guy who's going to be very involved, I think.
Yeah, and it's very puzzling to me how some of these guys are ranked so low. That's a guy that, I mean, if he's there in the second round, that's my guy, and that's going to be the guy that gets picked. There are a few of them that are on this list, but I think that he is the biggest of the upside for me, just based on, again, the situation, and he has the chance to make a real impact this year.
Yeah, and right now it's weird because, like, I wouldn't reach on a guy like Sam Laporta right now. Like, I wouldn't reach in the 12th round and grab him. He's not even getting drafted right now. So you're in a good spot where you can just settle and calm things down. Just circle him on your list. All right, 15th round. Yeah, I know he's going to be there. There's nobody talking about this guy right now.
Yeah. So for me, he might end up being the biggest sleeper of this entire list. I mean, we spoke a little bit before about, the sleeper Williams. I think this guy definitely is a challenge for second.
Yeah, just based on how low he is on boards, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, completely. So next week, we're going to go into some of the overvalued players and some of those guys that you might want to stay away from when they are right there at the top of the board and you're on the clock. But until next week, Zach, we'll see you next week.
Sounds good.
All righty. Take care, everybody. Happy Canada Day to those celebrating. Happy free agency to hockey fans and basketball fans. We head right into NFL fantasy football draft season here on Third Round Reversal. We'll see you guys next week.